Hello, and welcome to At Home, which is a video series where I get to answer all your questions and crazy ideas for Hunt and beyond. And no, it has never gone by a different name. Twice. If you want to ask a question that I might answer in a future video, well, ask it in the comments, just mark it with At Home, which is a lot easier to find than some other title ideas that I've had. With that out of the way, we can move on to our first question, which comes from Sebastian Kortman, who says, what do you think of a boss called the Ghost? Its special perk is that you have to illuminate her in order to deal full damage. If she is in darkness, you may only deal half as much. It would make all the light tools and consumables and the generators relevant at once. I have seen this idea in different versions for a while now, and usually if it's not called a ghost, it's called something like the Banshee. I think this idea sounds cool. We currently have 4 bosses in Hunt, and although they have different elemental weaknesses, none of them are affected by how much light is in the room. And this could give flares and fuses and lamps some more utility, and like you said, give the generator a reason to exist aside from making noise. Right now, I think the lamp is, well, useless. It looked really cool in the early alpha phases. Crytek has the original E3 demo on their YouTube channel, and you can see how the lamp was more of a necessity on night maps, especially when you could choose your contract and actually decide, okay, I'm going into a night map. So, if illuminating this boss made it take more damage, I think that could be a really unique mechanic, which is kind of like the requirement for adding a new boss to the game. And while this idea sounds really cool, I do have a few questions to make it work. So one, the quick one, what do we say about sunlight? If I pop a window to let the room breathe a little bit, could I just stand in the window to increase the amount of damage I'm doing? And does the ghost take less damage on night maps? The devs could say no, hunter lights only, but you know, that might break the immersion a little bit. So sunlight is a tricky one. And then 2, what do we say about fire? I mean, technically, fire bombs and red lamps illuminate the boss. Most people already toss a few red lamps at the spider and the assassin, so fire-based throwables would probably still be the dominant method for this boss. Also, if we say fire doesn't count, I would be worried that players might avoid going to the ghost if they don't have any light tools and consumables, because they know fighting that boss will take twice as long. With other bosses, as long as you have bullets or a melee weapon, you know you can kill the thing. So if we say fire doesn't count, that means players not using a flare gun or electric lamp will just be at a big disadvantage, and without the ability to choose a contract, that seems like a pretty unfair disadvantage. It's almost like a punishment, and I'm not sure players would find that very fun. So this isn't a no. I think one interesting workaround is maybe the devs could add special boxes of fuses around the ghost compound, and we could say those fuses emit ultraviolet light or something. This is as bad as the Kazoo Chaos Bomb. But anyway, ultraviolet fuses, you pop a few of those into the ghost compound and those will help you deal full damage, and then maybe you could also take those fuses with you to a different bounty fight for some sort of advantage. I don't know what that would be. Another idea, which isn't really a new boss at all, is to just buff the electric lamp and say it emits a special type of light, and it could be used to damage all the bosses a little bit as you work on it with bullets and melee. It's an interesting idea for a boss, but there are a lot of gameplay considerations I think you have to make before it would fit into the game. The next question comes from Clansum, who says, what about a perk that allows you to put health into the boss progression bar when banishing? When I first read this idea, I thought it was kind of silly and just broken. But let me tell you, this idea has stuck with me. If you don't know what Clansum means, he is saying the devs could add a trait that allows you to spend your health to increase the speed when banishing a boss. We already have Necromancer, which allows you to revive a teammate from a distance using Darksight, but it costs health to use, and it's already one of my favorite traits. And so Clansum Clansum's idea? Clansum's idea is if you are banishing, you can walk up to the banish site, hold interact, spend, I don't know, let's say 125 health, and I will explain why I chose that number later. But anyway, you spend 125 health and you speed up the banish, maybe it goes twice as fast. And of course there would need to be some sort of indication, like the banish icon would go from blue and glowy to maybe red and glowy, signifying it is going twice as fast. Before we dismiss this as totally broken, it also might be the coolest risk versus reward trait in the game. So one of the obvious use cases for this trait is when you are the last team on the map and you've counted all the bodies and you are certain you're alone. We've all been there, that happens, you know you're the last team. And so with this trait, you could speed up that process of getting to your next match just a little bit faster. But another use case that I think works well with this is for solo players who are already at a pretty big disadvantage at the bounty. Solo players, at least in my experience, don't usually go for a banish. Some do, but a lot don't. However, if they had this trait, solo players could be able to get in and get out just a little bit easier. With this trait, any team that doesn't head straight for the banish might not get there in time, but the glorious part is the solo player won't know if it was worth risking the health until they 1. Get shot, or 2. The banish is done and they can use Darksight. So solo players don't just have to KD farm, they could actually use this trait and play a little bit more aggressively and try to get those bounty tokens. And there are more use cases, but those are the 2 examples that I think are kind of interesting to think about. Now obviously this would need to have some limitations. If you have a team of people using this trait and that boosts it to like 6 times the normal speed, obviously that would be a bit broken. So 1, I would say this trait needs to work only once per banish, regardless of how many people in your party are carrying the trait. 2, there needs to be a high health cost, which is why I said 125 health. You don't want it to be easy to overcome and you just use 1 medkit charge and all of a sudden banishing isn't that bad. So I would say it needs to at least consume 2 health kit charges, or if you're lucky to find a medkit in the compound, you could use that too. And 3, I think it would need to be a pretty expensive trait, probably on par with something like Doctor, 8 points, because this is a pretty big gameplay change, but also it's an interesting trait that I could see changing up the way people approach bounties. Anyway, I've kind of let my mind run a little wild with this trait, but I do really like the idea, and I'm actually really curious what you guys think about this trait. Would you use it? Would you pay 8 points for it? Is it totally broken? Let me know. And the final question comes from Winter Grim, who says, how about a button to put down one of the weapons you are dual wielding so you could aim? And as a bonus, you get to keep the spare ammo for fighting like actual cowboys and gals did. You might be surprised how much this idea gets floated within the community, and so I chose it because it is a simple answer, at least for me personally. I'm going with no. Dual pistols are already pretty controversial, and I see post after post about players being very upset that they are being killed by dual pistols at any range beyond like 5 meters. And that's probably a little bit of hyperbole, but also it kind of isn't. So I think any buff to dual pistols would be received pretty poorly just in that regard right now. Nobody wants dual pistols to be more effective and brought into matches more often. But looking at this idea from a larger Hunt Showdown type of lens, Hunt is supposed to be a game about decisions and consequences. It is risk versus reward. If you make the decision to take dual pistols and you get in a situation where dual pistols aren't as effective, then being able to put a pistol down would undercut the consequences of bringing dual pistols. The limitations placed on loadouts are intentional. If you want to switch guns in the game, you have to either kill someone and pry it from their dead fingers, or find one on a box. I think being able to put down one of your dual pistols greatly changes the nature of how that weapon performs. But to be fair, I could be wrong, and maybe the devs think the recent nerfs went too far and now they want to find a way to make dual pistols more appealing to players, and sure, that could be an option. But I would be very surprised if we saw this idea introduced into the game, because it cancels what I believe is a core principle of Hunt, and that is living and dying with your choices. And with that, we conclude our questions for today. So tell me what you thought about these ideas. Do you want a photosensitive boss? Would you trade health for Banish progress? Let me know your thoughts below, and until the next one, goodbye.